I found a hidden letter at home, and my world fell apart. The secret my mother kept from me. I always thought I knew everything about my life. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood, raised by Teresa, a sweet and strong woman who taught me to be independent. I never questioned my origin. There were no photos of a father, no stories about grandparents. Just her and me. On my 27th birthday, I received a package with no return address. It was wrapped in brown paper and smelled old, like something that had been kept hidden for years. Inside, I found a handwritten letter. The ink was slightly faded, and the handwriting shaky. My heart began to race even before I finished the first line. My dear Lucia, I don't know how to start this letter. If you're reading this, it's because I've had the courage to send it. Or because someone else did it for me. My name is Daniela, and I am your biological mother. I froze. I had to read it 3 more times to believe what I was seeing. Teresa had never told me I was adopted. Never mentioned anything about another woman. The letter continued. Asterisk, I made the hardest decision of my life when you were born. I wasn't ready, and your father, well, he had disappeared. I handed you over to someone who I knew would love you more than I could at the time. That woman was Teresa. I dropped the letter on the table and sat down in silence. My entire world began to crack. Why had she hidden this from me? Who was Daniela? Why now? From that moment on, a part of me knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I couldn't sleep that night. The letter sat on my nightstand like a silent witness, demanding answers. I picked it up again and reread it, as if hoping something would change, some line that would make everything make sense. But all I found was more confusion. Daniela, a name I had never heard before. Why hadn't Teresa ever told me anything? Why had she made me believe that she was my only family? The next morning, I went to see her. I didn't call. I just showed up, letter in hand, my heart pounding in my chest. She opened the door with her usual warmth, but the smile disappeared the moment she saw my face and the letter. We sat in the living room. I didn't say anything. I just handed her the paper. Her hands trembled. She didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. I always knew this day would come, she said quietly. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice cracking. Because I was afraid. Afraid you'd hate me. Afraid you'd leave. I shook my head, tears threatening to fall. You lied to me, Teresa. My whole life. No, she said firmly, I loved you. That was never a lie. Not 1 second of it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what I felt. She got up and walked to the hallway. When she returned, she was holding a small, old wooden box. She placed it in front of me. She left this for you. I never had the courage to give it to you, until now. The box was locked. Teresa handed me a small key. Inside, I saw letters, photos, and a diary. And with that, my journey into a hidden past had just begun. I locked myself in my apartment that night. Holding the box in my lap like it was a sacred relic, I didn't know where to start. There were dozens of envelopes, some addressed to me, others without names. But what caught my attention was a small, leather-bound diary, worn around the edges. I opened it with trembling hands. September 15, 1996. That was the day I was born. Asterisk, today, I brought a girl into the world. I didn't cry, not even when I heard her first breath. I felt numb. I knew I couldn't keep her. Not because I didn't love her, but because I didn't know how to love myself. Every word stabbed me. My biological mother had written down her thoughts, her fears, her guilt. Page after page, she confessed how lost she felt. How she watched me sleep in the hospital, and whispered silent apologies. She mentioned Teresa, said she was the only person she trusted. Asterisk, Teresa doesn't judge me. She looks at Lucia like she's a gift from heaven. Maybe she is. Tears fell without asking permission. I felt a strange mix of pain, compassion, and gratitude. For the first time, I saw the full picture, not just the story Teresa told me, but the one Daniela had lived. I spent hours reading. There were mentions of a man, my biological father. She didn't name him, only said he disappeared when things got real. She didn't hate him, she pitied him. And then, in one entry, a line that changed everything. Asterisk, one day, I will find the strength to face her. To tell her I never stopped thinking about her. That I named her Lucia, because it means light. And even in my darkness, she was that. That night, I hugged the diary to my chest and cried myself to sleep. For the first time, I realized I had 2 mothers. One who raised me, and one who had never stopped loving me from a distance. The following days were a blur of emotion and uncertainty. I couldn't focus at work. I ignored my friends' messages. And I kept rereading the diary, as if some hidden message would suddenly appear. One afternoon, I gathered the courage to ask Teresa the question that had been haunting me. Do you know where Daniela is now? She hesitated. That pause said everything. I don't know exactly, she said finally, but I think she still lives in Chicago. Last I heard, she was working at a small bookstore downtown. That night, I stood outside that bookstore for over an hour. I didn't go in. I just watched from a distance, unsure of what I even wanted to say if I saw her. What if she didn't want to see me? What if she regretted writing that letter? But what scared me more was the possibility that I'd never get another chance. The next day, I returned. This time, I went inside. The store was quiet, with tall wooden shelves and the smell of old paper. A woman stood behind the counter, sorting books. She looked to be in her late 40s, maybe early 50s. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid. When she looked up, I froze. Her eyes, they were the same as mine. Hi, I said, barely above a whisper. Are you Daniela? She stared at me for a second too long, her expression unreadable. Then she put the book down slowly. Yes, she replied, I think. I'm your daughter. The silence that followed felt like the world holding its breath. Daniela stepped around the counter and took one hesitant step toward me. I was hoping this day would come, she whispered, eyes already brimming with tears. And just like that, the past and present collided. We sat in the back of the bookstore, surrounded by worn paperbacks and the soft hum of a nearby ceiling fan. Neither of us knew exactly how to begin. Daniela offered me tea, her hands trembling slightly as she poured it. I accepted it just to break the silence. I've imagined this moment 1,000 times, she said, eyes lowered. But now that you're here, I don't even know what to say. I don't either, I admitted. I've lived my whole life not knowing you existed. And suddenly, here you are. She looked at me then, really looked. You're so beautiful, she said softly. You look just like your father. My heart skipped. Do you know where he is? She shook her head slowly. He left when I was 3 months pregnant. Said he couldn't handle it. I never saw him again. I wasn't sure how to react. Part of me wanted to be angry, but mostly I just felt empty. Why didn't you come for me? I asked. After all these years, tears welled in her eyes. Because I was afraid I had lost the right. Teresa gave you everything I didn't want to confuse you, or make you feel torn between us. I wanted to tell her I understood. But the truth was I didn't. Not yet. She reached into her purse and handed me a folded photograph. It was old, slightly faded. A young woman Daniela was holding a baby wrapped in a white blanket. That was the day I gave you away, she whispered. I stared at the image, realizing I was looking at my own beginning. I read your diary, I said, watching her face. I know you named me Lucia. She smiled, the kind of smile that carried both pride and pain. You were my light. Even when I had to let you go. For a long time, neither of us spoke. But something had shifted, something silent but powerful. We had begun to fill in the blank spaces between us. The truth hurt, but it also brought clarity. And I knew, this story was only beginning. The days that followed were emotionally exhausting. I would go to work during the day, and visit Daniela in the evenings. We spoke for hours about her life, her regrets, her reasons. I learned that she never married. She lived a quiet life, surrounded by books and memories, but never stopped thinking of me. Every birthday, she lit a candle for me. Every December, she wrote a letter she never sent. Despite the years and distance, I felt a strange connection growing between us. It wasn't instant forgiveness or perfect understanding, but it was real. At the same time, things with Teresa became tense. I hadn't told her I'd met Daniela. It wasn't because I wanted to keep secrets, it was because I didn't know how to explain it. How do you tell the woman who raised you that you're spending your evenings with the woman who gave you away? The guilt weighed on me. So, I finally invited Teresa to my apartment. She arrived with her usual warmth, carrying a small container of lentil soup, like she had done for years. But the air was different. There's something I need to tell you, I said. She sat down quietly, waiting. I found Daniela. I've been seeing her. She didn't speak at first. Her eyes didn't widen. She just stared at the table, lips pressed into a thin line. I figured you might, she said at last. She was always in your eyes. I knew one day you'd want to know her. I'm not replacing you, I said, quickly. I needed answers. I know, she said, her voice soft, and I don't blame you. Then, she looked up and I saw the pain she tried so hard to hide. I just hope she doesn't take you away from me. I got up and hugged her tightly. No one could ever do that. I love you, Teresa. You're my mother. That hasn't changed. And as I held her, I realized something. I didn't have to choose one mother over the other. I had been born into one heart and raised in another. And maybe, just maybe, there was room in mine for them both. A week later, I did something that terrified me. I invited both of them, Teresa and Daniela, to have dinner together at my apartment. It felt like I was bringing two parts of myself into the same room for the first time. And I had no idea what would happen. Would it be awkward? Would it hurt? Would it heal something? When Teresa arrived, she brought a pineapple, my favorite since childhood. Daniela arrived just a few minutes later, holding a bouquet of daisies. She said they reminded her of me. The moment they saw each other, the air shifted. Teresa, Daniela said quietly. Daniela, Teresa replied, just as softly. There was history in that exchange. 1,000 unspoken words. Grief, gratitude, maybe even forgiveness. They sat at my table, across from one another. I served the food in silence, my hands trembling slightly. The beginning was tense, small talk, careful glances, but then, something unexpected happened. Teresa reached for her glass and said, "You made the right decision." Daniela blinked, caught off guard. "What? You gave her to me when I couldn't have children. You gave me a reason to wake up every day. I never thanked you." Tears welled up in Daniela's eyes. "I was scared you hated me." "I never hated you," Teresa said gently. "I just didn't know how to love you without feeling guilty." The room was quiet, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of emotion, of truth, of years finally being acknowledged. I looked at the two women who had shaped my life in such different ways. One had given me life. The other had taught me how to live it. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: peace. Dinner ended with laughter. Tentative, but real. When they left, they hugged each other, hesitant, but sincere. And I knew something had changed. Not just in them, but in me too. A few days after that dinner, I returned to the wooden box I had found in the closet. There were still envelopes I hadn't opened. Daniela had written over the years, but never sent. Each one was addressed to Lucia, the name she gave me at birth. I sat on the floor and began reading them one by one. April 2003. Today you would be 7. I wonder if you like chocolate cake like I did. I baked one, just in case. Silly, right? But it made me feel closer to you. Junho 2009. I saw a girl today who looked just like you might look. I almost stopped to ask her name, but I didn't. I didn't want to scare her. I hope you're happy, wherever you are. August 2015. I wanted to call you today. I looked at the phone for hours. But I didn't know what I'd say. What if you hated me? What if you never wanted to hear my voice? Each letter carried a piece of her soul, bits of time and love frozen on paper. Some were joyful, others were filled with regret, but all of them shared one thing. She had never stopped loving me. At the bottom of the box, I found something unexpected. A hospital bracelet with my birth date. I held it in my hand, realizing it was likely the last thing Daniela had kept from the day she said goodbye to me. And that's when it truly hit me. I wasn't abandoned. I was loved in a way that was painful, complicated, but undeniably real. I gathered the letters into a binder and labeled it Lucia S. Story, because I wanted to remember, not just the reunion, but the journey, the questions, the longing, the love that waited patiently through silence. A few days after that dinner, I returned to the wooden box I had found in the closet. There were still envelopes I hadn't opened. Daniela had written over the years, but never sent. Each one was addressed to Lucia, the name she gave me at birth. I sat on the floor and began reading them one by one. April 2003. Today you would be 7. I wonder if you like chocolate cake like I did. I baked one, just in case. Silly, right? But it made me feel closer to you. Junho 2009. I saw a girl today who looked just like you might look. I almost stopped to ask her name, but I didn't. I didn't want to scare her. I hope you're happy, wherever you are. August 2015. I wanted to call you today. I looked at the phone for hours, but I didn't know what I'd say. What if you hated me? What if you never wanted to hear my voice? Each letter carried a piece of her soul, bits of time and love, frozen on paper. Some were joyful, others were filled with regret, but all of them shared one thing. She had never stopped loving me. At the bottom of the box, I found something unexpected. A hospital bracelet with my birth date. I held it in my hand, realizing it was likely the last thing Daniela had kept from the day she said goodbye to me. And that's when it truly hit me. I wasn't abandoned. I was loved in a way that was painful, complicated, but undeniably real. I gathered the letters into a binder and labeled it, Lucia's Story. Because I wanted to remember, not just the reunion, but the journey. The questions. The longing. The love that waited patiently through silence. It had been over a month since I met Daniela. Our relationship was still delicate, like something newly planted that required constant care, but it was growing. Slowly, beautifully. We began to share more of our daily lives. She would text me every morning with a quote from a book she loved. I'd send her pictures of my lunch, or the sunset from my apartment window. Little things that helped us feel like we hadn't lost so much time. One Saturday, we decided to take a walk in the park. The trees were blooming, and kids were running around, laughing. We sat on a bench, watching them play. I used to wonder what you liked to do, she said. Whether you were loud or quiet, shy or brave. I imagined you 1,000 different ways. I smiled. And now I'm just grateful to know the real you. We sat in silence for a while. I looked at her, looked at her hands, slightly aged but gentle, at her eyes, filled with both strength and sadness. And suddenly, without planning it, the words slipped out of me. Mom. She turned to me, stunned. What did you say? I felt my eyes burn. I called you Mom. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying to hold back tears. Her shoulders shook. I reached for her, and we hugged tight long, like we were trying to make up for every hug we never had. I never thought I'd hear that word from you, she whispered. And I never thought I'd say it. But I want to. It didn't erase the years we'd lost. It didn't change the past. But it gave us something new. A beginning. One where love was no longer hidden in letters or dreams, but spoken, shared, and finally, real. Months had passed since I first opened that hidden letter. So much had changed since that day. I had discovered my origin, reconnected with a mother I thought I'd never know, and somehow deepened my bond with the one who raised me. It wasn't easy, but it was worth every tear, every question, every moment of silence. Daniela and Teresa had slowly formed a fragile, respectful friendship. They didn't become best friends, but they began to understand each other, to accept their roles in my life. That was more than I ever expected. One afternoon, I visited Daniela's apartment. She had rearranged the living room, and there was a new frame on the wall. Inside it was a photo of the three of us, Daniela, Teresa, and me, taken the night we had dinner together. Below the picture, a small plaque read, Lucia and Love Twice. Reyes once. I felt the tears well up again. You made this? I asked. She nodded. It felt right. Later that week, I printed the same photo and placed it in my own home. For a long time, I had lived with a hole I couldn't quite name. A quiet emptiness I had learned to ignore. But now I understood what it had been. The need to know the truth. The need to know my truth. And now that I did, everything felt lighter, clearer. I still called Teresa Mom. She was my anchor, my home. And sometimes, in soft, quiet moments, I called Daniela Mom too. Because love, I learned, doesn't have just one shape. It doesn't always arrive the way we expect. But when it's real, it stays. It was never about choosing between them. It was about accepting that my heart was big enough to hold them both.